All right, Daf Yomi for this morning, special Chol Moed edition, volume 3, is sponsored by Rabbi Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi in honor of the Maggid Shiur, me, Rabbi Loiterman, and the privilege of having his father learning with us during Chol Moed. Thanks, Dad, for coming. We had a wonderful time. Sorry about the delay in Philadelphia. He's back in Norfolk. We are here in Toronto, and we are at Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, 6 lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Yossi, B'medvar Mamurim. So he said, when is the circumstances that everybody's going to be able to combine together to become one group of witnesses? So he says they have to be part of the warning. So he says, otherwise, Ma yasu shnei achim, what would two brothers do, right? If two brothers are going to come together and they happen to witness an event together, that means always their testimony is invalid. So heichi amrin lahu, what do we say to these folks? So Amar Rabba says, Hachi amrin lahu, this is what we say to them. Lemechse asisu o lasude asisu. Why are you here? Are you here just as a bystander, or are you a witness? Also, if they say we're here to witness, so then then if one of the people who said I'm here as a witness is in fact a relative or an invalid witness, so then they're going to invalidate the whole testimony. Also, if they say no, we're just here we just heard the noise and we came running, we want to see what's going on. So mas yasu shneach and sharo be'echad sharagas and nefesh. So then that isn't going to invalidate, because if that would, just simply being there is going to invalidate. How would two people who are brothers ever walking together in the street ever be able to witness anything, right? This way, it allows two brothers, one to say, I'm here to witness, and the other one says, I'm just here to be here.
Even if there's three and both say I want to witness, and there's a third person who's not a relative.
Nope, that's what he said. Once they're a group, they are a group.
If they don't think so.
Itmar. So we have a member of the Gemara, Amar of Yehuda, Rabbi says in Rishmol, Halach Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Rav Nachman Amar halacha Rebbe, and Rav Nachman says the halacha is like Rebbe, right? He says that it makes, and Rebbe who said that dini mamonis and dini nefashos, this is the same rule, right? Right, but whereas Rabbi Yossi said that dini nefashos, it applies not by dini mamonis. So therefore, that's their argument. Says we're on Vav Amma Beis, new Mishnah. Hayishnaim roin oso mechalon zeh. So they're standing by this building, right? And in this building, there's these. Here's our building, right? And in the building, there's window here, and here's a window here. And there's witnesses sitting over here, and a couple of witnesses sitting over here. And this is the plaza in the middle, and this is where the action happens, okay? So these people are seeing it this way, and these people are seeing it this way, okay? So that's what's going on. I intentionally did not make buildings on opposite sides of the Rishus Harabim, like they would be across the street from each other, because that's a big machlokas rishonim that I just think that's a Shabbos year, right? We're going to now label these conversations that are more difficult as Shabbos year conversations. Lots of Shabbos years that can come up. So two witnesses are seeing them from this window, and two are seeing them from this window. So one guy is in the middle, and he down here. Let's say he's down here, and he is giving the warning. When some of the witnesses from one group can see some of the witnesses in the other group, that makes them one group. But if they cannot see each other at all, then that's two separate groups of witnesses. Therefore, right? This is what Nachi had said yesterday as well, that if one of the witnesses, since they're two separate groups now, if one of these becomes Eidim Zomimim, so it can come out that this guy can get killed because of these witnesses, and these guys could get killed because they were Zomimim trying to get him killed, even though he actually did it.
Just to clarify, they have to see each other through the window, not like
no, I'm not sure that. I think that if they could be in the same big hallway, right, same room, as long as they can see each other. Yeah, they don't have to see each other through the window.
Oh, okay.
Right? So therefore, the second set of witnesses is going to be exempt from Misa because they are valid witnesses. Rabbi Yossi says, that is not enough. You need to have the two witnesses themselves. They have to give the warning. Shnamar, as the pasuk says, Al pi shnaim edom. They are going to die. The person's going to die by the word of the two witnesses. Meaning, normally we say that means that the testimony of the two witnesses in court. No, this means actually they have to be the ones who give the warning. Davar acher, another explanation of this phrase, al pi shnaim. Al pi shnaim edim shalote sanhedrin shamas mi pia turguman. Means that you have to be able to hear the witness's testimony, not through a translator. The Sanhedrin famously had to be able to speak all languages in order to be able to hear and understand all the witnesses
Yiddish,
that come in.
Hebrew, Russian, Chinese, everything.
That's right. It's all the languages. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia. Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia says, Amar Rav Neimar Minayin le'idus miyuchedes shehi pesula. How do we know that if the testimony, if you have one person, let's say only in each of these windows you only had one person. So how do I know that would be puzzle? That would be no good. Shenamar, pasuk says, Lo yamus al pi eid echad. You shouldn't kill somebody because of one witness. So my echad, what do you mean by one witness? Ilema eid echad mamish. If you mean literally, there's only one witness. So mireisha shaminan leit. Then I would the shaminan law. I already know that from the first part of the pasuk that says al pi shnaim eidim that you need two witnesses in order for something to be considered testimony. Elamai echad. So what does it mean when the pasuk says you shouldn't kill somebody for one witness? It doesn't mean just one witness. It means echad echad. You have two witnesses, but they are separate and cannot see each other. So it's one witness here and one witness there. That is not going to be considered testimony. That's what that means. Tanya nami hachliv a brisa that also supports the statement. Lo yamus al pe'at eid echad. You should not kill somebody based on their single individual's testimony. Lavi shnayim shirono so echad mechalon zeh. This is going to include two people. One see him from this window, ve'echad mechalon zeh, and one sees him from another window. Ve'ein ro'en zeh zeh, but they cannot see each other. She'ein mitzarfin. Those two witnesses cannot combine. V'lo not only that, ela afilu b'zeh achar zeh bechalon echad. Even if the two witnesses witnessed through the same window, but one after the other. They didn't witness it at the same time. So we have different place, but also it applies if it's the same place, but different times. Ein mitzarfin, then those two witnesses cannot testify. Amalei Rav Papa Labai, so Rav Papa says to Rabbi, Hashta uma echad mechalon zeh v'echad mechalon zeh, dahai kachazi kulo maisa v'hai kachazi kulo maisa. 1 second, says Rav Papa. He says, you've got a case, you just told me case number one was where witness one was looking out one window, witness number two was looking out the other window. Both of them witnessed the entire Avera, and that doesn't combine. So that you said, and that's even though they witnessed the entire event. So lo mitzdarfi there. So Amar, you said lo mitzdarfi, and that they don't combine. Bazeh achar zeh, but if they're going to each see a little part of the Avera out the window, one after the other, this one's only seeing half of the event, and this one's only seeing half of the end. So, me boy, how can that be a combination? Right? Testimony cannot be, as we learned this back in Sanhedrin, right? We had the circumstance where one person testified, we had the girl, right? Where he had one hair on the back, one hair on the front. We said can't combine the testimonies because nobody witnessed two hairs. So you're combining half a testimony and half a testimony. We can't combine those testimonies, right? So obviously that doesn't work. If you can't combine two fellows with full testimonies, you can't combine two fellows with half testimony. So Marley says, Lo nitzcha el laboas erva. I could have a avera that can be going on for a minute, and therefore everybody can witness the event, even if they're not seeing it one at a time. For example, somebody is having relations with an erva, with someone not allowed to marry, so then that's an avera that the person could be doing for a minute. So then this person could look and see it, and then he can walk away from the window, and the next person can come and see it, and then he'll walk away from the window, and they both will have witnessed the entire event enough to testify. That's not going to combine because they did not see the event at the same time together.
It's interesting.
Amar Rava. Yeah. Okay, Amar Rava.
I forget my question.
Sorry, you can write them down. You submit them after the class. Amar Rava. Rava says, Im hayu roen es hamasra. Let's say they can see this fellow in the middle who's giving the warning, right? Not according to Rabbi Yossi, says the witnesses have to be the ones giving the warning. Let's say these two witnesses are in the window, these are in the window, and they're seeing this guy in the middle. Or a masaroa, a son, or the person who's giving the warning can see them, mitzdarfin, so then the witnesses can combine. Right? Because it's miktzos and roinei elu, right? These can see this guy and these guys can see this guy, so if he's part of this group and he's part of this group, they can see each other, so they all combine together. V'amar Rava. Rava says furthermore, Masra she'amru, this person who's giving the warning, afilu mipi atzmo v'afilu mipi shade. So he says that this warning can be given even from himself and even from a shade, even from a demon, right?
Wait, that's interesting. So even if they don't know each other, these people don't know each other, but because they could see each other, they're considered one group.
That is correct.
Even if we were at a park and it was like two people here and two people completely on this side, no shaykhs to each other, witnessing a thing, they'd be considered one group.
That is correct. That's correct, because they were witnessing it together as a group. That's what makes them a group.
They don't necessarily see the shade necessarily?
Well, we're going to see what a shade is in a second. So I just want to explain what we mean by a shade. I was going to say something, but Brian asked a question, so I had to wait. So he says what happens is, right, even if the murderer himself says, hey, everybody, I know what I'm about to do is usher, and I know I'm going to get killed for it, I'm doing it anyway. That's considered a warning enough. He doesn't even have to get the witnesses to warn him. Not according to Rabbi Yossi says the witnesses have to warn him. But according to those who say that a witness doesn't have to warn him, even the murderer himself can. And even a shade. What's a shade? A shade is either literally a demon, but Rambam, of course, famously says there are no such things. So it's just a voice, and you don't know who is saying it. That's because that's what a shade is. A shade is a voice that you hear, but you don't see the body of wherever it's coming from.
Protect you from rain or sunlight.
Or
protect you from rain and sunlight.
A shade. Oh, that's yes. Shade as well. Yes. So, but this could be a circumstance where the person who's committing the act of the crime doesn't even know who's giving him. That's the point. Doesn't even know who's giving the warning. He just hears from the crowd somewhere, "Hey, don't do that. That's usher." He doesn't have to know who's the person who's warning him or know that those are the witnesses. He just needs to know. The murderer just needs to know in his head what I'm doing is usher. That's all I need.
You, but there could be other people in the park who are hearing you. You could be also warning other people to do not do the same thing.
Okay, so there you go. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, "Edus miyuchedes keshera bedini mamus." Edus miyuchedes, individual one witness at a time, that actually could work. They do combine when it comes to monetary cases. We know that monetary cases, there are some differences. We can be more lenient with monetary cases because even though we had a Gzera Shava where we connected monetary cases to capital cases, we did say that there is a special requirement of vihitzil, of saving and trying to get people off the hook when they are in situations of death sentences or Makkos, where it does not exist by Mammon. So sometimes we have this sort of an interesting phenomenon. Sometimes we're trying to say that the court should follow the same procedures, and then there are certain procedures that are stricter by capital crimes, and the Rishonim try to argue this through and try to figure out exactly when do we say that and when don't we say that. But here's an example of edus miyuchedes, of individual witnesses that don't see each other, right? They can each combine. So if one guy says, hey, I need you to witness this, I'm going to loan him $200, and then he says, okay, I'll witness it, and he walks away. And then they pull another guy off the street, look, I'm about to, I just want you to witness that I'm about to, that could work. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, lo yumas al pi eid echad, because the pasuk specifically says, you can't kill somebody based on one witness, right? Bedidin nefashos hu de'ein kshera. That's only by capital cases. Of Abedini Mominus, when it comes to financial cases, kshera, that would work, right? And we don't apply the Gzera Shava, right? We don't apply the Gzera Shava to connect the two, and that's where the Rishon discuss.
Without Hasra, there's no Chayv Misa, right? If two people just witness,
correct.
So he could get punished.
Although we just saw that there's a machlokas as to what Hasra is.
Right. No, yeah, and I was wondering that too. It doesn't have to be a Jewish voice. How about if it was a woman's voice? Is that?
It sounds like it could be a tape recording.
Right. Right. That's
right.
Yeah.
Maskif Rav Zutra El Miyata. So Rav Zutra says, well, if that's true, B'dini Nefashos Tatzil Alama Tanan Hu Vehein Neheragin. Well, 1 second. If the whole point that you're making is that you're trying to save people, so then the way that you've done it is that you've created a circumstance that now these two witnesses cannot combine together. Okay, so by not combining the witnesses together, the case of our Mishnah comes out that if I've got two guys here, and these guys turn into Zomimim, and these guys are not Zomimim, that means that we're going to kill this set because they're Zomimim. We're going to kill this guy because this guy witnessed. Okay, because you don't combine them, and that was the whole point. We don't combine. But if we would have combined them, what would have happened? Then these people would have been found to be Zomim. These would have been unable to testify because they're part of a group that contains people who are Zomim. So they couldn't testify. Their testimony is invalid. So therefore they couldn't kill this guy. And then, since the entire group wasn't found to be Zomim, you couldn't kill these guys either. And you would have saved everybody by being able to combine them.
How would that work? Aiden Zomim wouldn't be there. That's the whole point.
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
could they see each other? Then they're actually.
But the thing is that this is what two sets are coming in saying, right? One group is saying we did see it, right? And then the people are coming in saying no, you didn't, right? But since they're claiming no, we were in the same place, we saw it, and these people were with us, and we saw it, right? So then that's considered they're considered one group now. Even if two witnesses, if somebody else comes and says, hey, you couldn't have been with that group, you were with us. Of course, there's going to be a contradiction, right? The other two witnesses come around and say, no, he was with us, right?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So that's a fair point, Kasha. So that is a good point. Sounds like the issue ultimately comes down to that the pasuk says right? That you can't combine the two together when you're dealing with prohibitions of capital cases. Even though, generally speaking, we would have presumed the reason why you don't combine the two with capital cases is in order to save people's lives. And our Mishnah clearly has a circumstance where it's actually going to come out as a stringency and more people will die as a result of not combining them. We nevertheless do not combine them. Rav Yossi Omer, Rav Yossi says. Now, Rav Yossi continued on and he says, no, the two witnesses have to give the hasra. They have to give the warning. Amar le Rav Papa Abaye. So Rav Papa says to Abaye, Umi is le Rabbi Yossi haisvara. Does Rabbi Yossi really hold of this? Ve'atznan, didn't we learn the Mishnah? Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi says, Hasone neharag mipnei shehu kemuad umusra. Let's say somebody is a murderer and he kills through negligence. We're going to see that that's going to be our next parak, and he is somebody who what's it called? And he hates Reuven hates Shimon, right? But then Reuven accidentally kills Shimon. So we say
out of the hatred.
Well, see, that's the kind of the thing, right? The hatred is underlying there, right? It's hard to be able to separate and prove that the reason why you weren't careful is because you didn't really care about his safety, right? So, I'm sorry, this is not a case of accident of negligence. This is just a regular case of murder, right? Sone nerag, somebody who hates another person. Reuven hates Shimon, right? And then he kills Shimon. So he's chayav misa despite the fact that nobody warned him. Why? Because somebody who hates somebody else is considered under a standing warning. You know you hate the guy, don't go near him, right? That's basically a standing warning. Now,
a restraining order.
Right. So now, according to Rabbi Yossi, though, who cares if the person knew it or didn't know it? That's not Rabbi Yossi's point. The witnesses have to say it, right? It's not a warning unless the witnesses say it. So he answered back, Kahu Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda that is different, right? That's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Different Rabbi Yossi. The other Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi.
It's like maybe.
That is, I'll tell you who it is because he brings it here. That's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, and the other is
Rabbi Yossi ben Chalimia.
Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta, right? It's Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta, right? So Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta is the other one. So that's why there's two different Rabbi Yossis, so you're confusing two opinions of Rabbi Yossis. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda said, "A chaverin tzarech hasra," somebody who is a Talmid Chacham, he does never need to be warned because he already knows the halacha that you're not allowed to do it. Levi shelo nitna hasra lahavchi bin shogli. The whole point of getting a warning is so that you make sure that the person knows that he wasn't allowed to do it. Right? We don't want somebody saying, "I didn't know," so now we warn him in order to make sure he knows. But if he knows, then you don't need a warning. That's fine. That's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. But Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta says, no, there's a technical requirement that the witnesses themselves have to be the one giving the warning. Davar acher. Next explanation of Al Pi Shnayim Eidim is it says Shalot Tehei Sanhedrin Shomas Mi Pure Turguman that the Sanhedrin could not hear it from interpreters. So Hanhu Luazi the also Lekami de Rava. There was a story that there were a couple of guys who spoke Laz. That was another language. Laz is just usually the generic term for a foreign language. So these guys spoke a foreign language. They came to Rava's based in Oki Rava Turkman Benayu, and Rava put up a interpreter in the court. So Vehechi Ravidach, a translator. So Vehechi Ravidach, how could he do that? Mishnah says they said in the Mishnah that you can't have an interpreter. So Rava miyadahava yada madahavu amri, because Rava understood the language. He understood it well enough, right? He knew what they were saying to him. But he didn't know the language well enough to speak back to the witnesses. So therefore, he had an interpreter for the sake of communicating clearly with them. But he knew the language well enough so that understood it. Correct. So that's why he was able to.
And that's considered okay.
That's considered okay. That's the point. Zayin Amid Aleph. Ila'a v'Tuvya kreve de'arva hava. So Elah and Tuvya, they were relatives of a guarantor on a loan, right? To understand guarantor, Reuven loaned Shimon the money, and Levi says, if Shimon can't pay, I will pay. Okay? So what happens is Elah and Tuvya, they were relatives of Levi. So they wanted that they were the Kreve de Arvahava. Savar Rav Papa Lamemar. So Rav Papa said, Gabe Lovil Malva Rechike Dinhu. They would be allowed to give testimony about Reuven and Shimon's loan because all they're testifying is about that Shimon has to pay. Levi is not going to be involved in this case yet. So therefore, we should allow them to testify that Shimon paid the loan because this has nothing to do with Levi. Amar le Rav Huna, brother of Yeshua, le Rav Papa. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua, says to Rav Papa, Ileis le lelove lav basar arva azil malve. He says, no, Levi is in the case, because if it's in fact that Shimon does owe the money and then Shimon doesn't have to pay, Levi is going to be the one responsible for jumping in. So therefore, at this point, you are really helping out your relative. Now, why is this piece of Gemara here? Fair question. Rishonim deal with that issue as well, because this Gemara, talking about guarantors on loans, belongs back in a conversation we had in Sanhedrin, where we talked about guarantors on contracts, and we were talking about that in the last parak of Baba Basra, really, right? We had the last parak of Baba Basra when we talked about that.
It could be because also this Gemara is a big thing about displaying Edis, which is connecting Edis. Maybe that's why it's
So again, another good Shabbos here, right? There's a bit of big Ritva on this, but yeah, okay. Says the Mishnah. Right? Says the next Mishnah. Misha Nigmar Dino, somebody who had his case judged, Ubarach, and then he runs away. Ubarach Neoso based in, and then he comes to the same based in, comes back to the same based in. So then, Ein Sosrin Es Dino. So then they cannot take up the case again and say, okay, it's a new case because he ran away, he didn't get killed, so now he wants to come back. Can we make a new case about it again? Any place that two people come to a court and say that we're testifying that there was a court verdict about another person, so then the based in shall ploni poni in another based in, uploni edov, and they also have to say these were the witnesses that were there, harez nerag. So the person can get killed based on that. They're not actually testifying as to what the case was. They're not testifying that we saw the murder. They're testifying that they know that this fellow was convicted of murder in such and such a court with these witnesses, and that's enough for the new court to be able to carry out the death sentence. Okay? Sanhedrin noheges ba'aretz ubechutz la'aretz. A Sanhedrin, right, which is the court of 23, they have those courts both inside of Eretz Yisrael and outside of Eretz Yisrael. So they would be able to judge these cases both inside Eretz Yisrael and outside. Sanhedrin hahoreges echad b'shavua nikres chovlonis. A Sanhedrin which kills somebody once every 7 years is considered a destructive court, right? Normally, the based-in is supposed to try to not kill people. So if they do, they're considered a destructive based-in if they kill somebody once every 7 years. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says echad l'shivim shana, once every 70 years, right? So now, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva say, "Ilu hayinu b'Sanhedrin." If we were on a Sanhedrin, lo nerag odam me'olam, nobody would ever get killed. We'd figure out a way to save everybody. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "Af hein marbit shofchei dam v'Yisrael." That would be great, except being light on criminals, right, is not good because then there'll be lots of murderers, right? So you don't want that. So therefore, who are you helping?
Sounds
right?
like
this is the local that right. This is exactly the same discussion that we're having today in Loiterman, right? Same hug a thug, right? So that's it. This is hug a thug. That's how our Pierre Polyev says it, right? Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva are guilty of hug a thug. Says the Gemara. Lifnei oso basin hu de'in sosrin. So the way the Mishnah sounds is they can't go back to the same basin and have the case retried. Ha lifnei basin acher. If he runs away and he goes to a new court and he wants demands a new trial, sosrin. So then you could do that. So, but then hatani seifa. But then the next part of the Mishnah says, Kol makom sheyamdu shnayim v'yomru me'idin anu esish ploni shenigmar dino bebeis din ploni uploni edav harei zenerag. That anybody who comes and testifies and says, but we saw in court that the court case was finished, that testimony would be accepted, which means that you accept the verdict of a previous court. So which is it? Can you get a retrial, or do they accept on face value the verdict of the previous court? So Rabbi Lokasha, Rabbi says, I'll explain, it's not a contradiction. Kan be'eretz Yisrael, kan b'chutz la'aretz. It depends if the person's in Eretz Yisrael or in Chutz La'aretz. If the original court was in Chutz La'aretz, and then this guy runs to Eretz Yisrael, the Eretz Yisrael court has the right to overturn an outside of Eretz Yisrael court. Right? And that's how that works. The Tanya is going to Rabbi Yehuda ben Dustoi Omer. Rabbi Yehuda ben Dustoi says, Mishar B'Shimon Shetach, in the name of Rabbi Shimon Shetach. Baruch me Aretz l'Chutz La'aretz. If somebody leaves Eretz Yisrael, runs away to Chutz La'aretz, and goes to court in order to get himself a new trial, Ein Soser Nesdi, no, we do not overrule the court. Eretz Yisrael has higher authority, and we do not allow the Chutz La'aretz court to overrule an Eretz Yisrael court. Mechutz La'aretz La'aretz, but if they run from outside of Eretz Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael, Sosr Nesdino, you can overrule it. Why? Because Eretz Yisrael has special merits to be able to get to the truth, right? To help people find the right answers, right? It's good to learn in Eretz Yisrael so that you can get to the heart of the matter and learn really well, right, Eli? So Sanhedrin no haggis. So a Sanhedrin, they have it in Eretz Yisrael. They have them in outside of Eretz Yisrael. Minani mila. How do I know that? These should be to you as courts for all generations. So this tells us that a Sanhedrin exists both in Eretz Yisrael and outside of Eretz Yisrael. If that's true, so if that's the case, so then what does it mean that the courts have to be bisharecha? Normally we say bisharecha means that the mitzvah applies to Eretz Yisrael only, not to Chutz La'aretz. So therefore, why does the pasuk tell me that I have to put a court bisharecha? Doesn't that mean only in Eretz Yisrael? No, bisharecha tamoshiv batei b'kol pel ibir. It just means in Eretz Yisrael you have to put more courts up. In Eretz Yisrael, you put up courts in every city. You also put every courts up in every town, right? You have local and regional courts. But the Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, Tamoshe B'chol Pelech Pelech, you only have regional courts. You don't have local courts. Why is it? Because in Eretz Yisrael, you have each of the Shvatim have their own court that is for their own individual Shevet, and they're supposed to go to their local Shevet court. What happens if you have a dispute between members of two different Shvatim? Then you have to go to the regional courts. Chutz La'aretz, everybody's not living in their locations anyway. It's always considered that way. So therefore, you're only going to need regional courts.
So they only had three judges, like a court of three.
No, these are 20. I think these are the 23. These are the Sanhedrin.
Sanhedrin and Gullus.
That's correct. That's what the Mishnah says, right? That in Chutz La'aretz. Yep. Via Tamoshev B'chol Irvi, you don't have to set them up locally in every city. Sanhedrin ha'oreges, then we said a Sanhedrin that kills somebody once every 7 years. So boilu achas l'shivim shanon. So now, what we said is that everybody basically kills every 7 years, considered a destructive court. Rabbi Elazar said once every 70 years. Now, what did he mean? Does he mean boilu achas l'shivim shanon nikras chavlanas? Does he mean once every 70 years is considered a destructive court? O dilma orech arahu. Or is he saying, no, once every 70 years is the normal amount. Once every 7 is destructive. Once every 70, that should happen. So, Teku, that's a good question. We don't know exactly whether that Basin is supposed to kill people once every 70, or even once every 70 is a bad thing.
It sounds like, why would not sound like he's arguing entirely? Like, usually when he says, that means he's arguing.
So if he's arguing, so that sounds like the second, right? That he's arguing would be the first answer, right? Echas l'shivim nikras chovlanis. Then he'd be arguing, right? That's a good point. Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva, Omrim Ilu Hayinus. Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Akiva said, if we were there, nobody would ever get killed. So Hechiyav, Havu Avdi. What would they do in order to get everybody off the hook? So Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar, Damri Tarvayu. It's all a matter of what questions you ask the witnesses in order to trip them up. So Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar, they said, Re'isem Treifa Harag, Sholim Harag. Did the guy who got murdered, was he a treifa or was he a healthy person? If he's a treifa, so then you don't get killed for killing somebody who's already going to die anyway. So Amar, she says, Imtim Salom or Sholim Hava. Okay, they could do an autopsy at the end. They say, look, the guy was perfectly healthy. So Dibba B'makum Saif, Nakav Hava. Maybe he had a hole in his lung right where you stuck the sword. And so therefore the sword went right through. Therefore you can't prove it.
We're not allowed to do autopsies.
Right. So they wouldn't. I guess they'd have to investigate. They could still investigate, take a look at the corpse and see how he was killed, right? Mm-hmm. So therefore, there's always an excuse, always a way around this, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what about Babo al Erva? What would be another example? Somebody is having relations with somebody who's ulcer to them. So Heichi Havavdi, what would they would say? So Abai Varava, Damri Tavai, Abai and Rava, they would say, Risim Kimachocho Bishvo Feris. Did you see? The literal translation is the applicator inside the tube, right? Because you can imagine a makeup applicator and a tube, right, going inside each other. So basically, it is a description of the actual act. Would you actually have seen the intercourse? And that would be difficult to actually observe. So for Rabbanan, Heichi Daini, so what about the Rabbanan? So if you didn't see the Aveira, how are you testifying in order to kill them? So the answer is they hold like Kishmuel. They hold like Shmuel. Damar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Ben Menafim Mishiarok Menafim. In order to judge somebody liable for adultery, you only have to appear, you have to see them appear to be doing an act of adultery. Right? It doesn't have to be that graphic. You don't have to see that detail, right? You can presume that they're committing adultery if it looks like they're doing that.
is yichud enough to be considered adultery? Because that's just for sotu, right?
That's correct. So the yichud would not be enough. You actually have to see them, but what you have to see is the machlokas.
Right.
Elu hein hagolin. Now, it makes good sense if you've ever learned Makkos without learning Sanhedrin first. It's always a little bit tricky. Why are we going to Edom Zomim to Golis? Like, where's the connection? The answer is because we went through the Sanhedrin. We went through all of the Mises Based In. We then finished Mises Based In when we went through a sidetrack for a bit to go through Edom Zomim for a moment. Now we're back to the next level punishment. Next level punishment is Golis that you get for killing negligently. So now let's talk about killing negligently. Harag nefesh bishgaga. Somebody kills somebody through negligence. Hayamagil b'magila v'nafla alav. Let's say, for example, you were rolling your roof leveling device, right? And it rolls off your roof and falls onto somebody. V'harag to, and it kills the person on the ground. Hayamishal shel b'chavis. You were lowering with a rope a barrel, right? V'nafla alav, and you let it slips out of your hand, and the barrel falls on somebody below and kills him. V'harag to.
That would be his fault for standing underneath.
That's going to be our discussion. We're going to discuss whether it's his fault for standing underneath or not. Hayori besulam. He was going down a ladder. V'nafla alav, and he falls off the ladder, and he falls and hits somebody and kills him underneath. V'harag to. Hareze gola. Those are all examples of where somebody gets sent to golas. Aval. However, imaya moshech b'magila. If you were pulling this roller up, right? V'nafla alav, and as you're pulling up, let's say the rope breaks and rolls off, then v'harag to, kills person. Hayadola b'chavis, or you are pulling the bucket up, v'nifsaka chavel, and the rope breaks, v'nafla alav, and it falls on him, v'harag to, kills the person. So then, or third case, Zayin Amabez, Haya Ola Besulam, he was going up a ladder, v'nafla alav, and he falls off the ladder as he's going up. So Vahargo and kills the person, Hareza Enu Gula. Then the person does not go to Golas. Zeh Klal, here's the rule. Kol Shebederech Yerida So Gola. You're only liable for Golas if you kill the person negligently in an act of downward motion. Shalo Bederech Yerida So, if it's not an act of downward motion, Enu Gola, you do not go to Golas.
They don't get a kapara? Is it that they don't get a kapara?
So this is going to be our question. This is a great point. There's going to be two reasons why a person does not go to Golas. And this is where the Gemara keeps asking this. It gets a little confusing. It's good to clarify right away. You could not go to Golas if you're what's called karov lamezid, meaning you're not negligent. You are practically a murderer. You should have been more careful. Right. Your act is so negligent, so badly, is so irresponsible.
You're in prison for life.
That you should go. You can't get a death sentence because there are no two witnesses, and it wasn't really on purpose. But we can't let you off the hook with a simple kapara of Golas.
Right.
Therefore, you don't go to exile. That's number one.
How about Makkos?
We can't give you Makkos because killing somebody is not chayv Makkos, right? What the punishment would be is a good question, but it can't be Golas. Okay. The other way to not get Golas is if your crime is completely accidental. It's not your fault, and it was you were doing everything right, and it's not your fault at all.
And you checked everything, make sure everything was tight or whatever.
Correct. That's called karav la'ones, and karav la'ones. Your avera is not severe enough to send you to Golas. So we are always going to say, when we have a case like this, why is it that you're off the hook? The answer is derech aliyah is already karov la'onis. Why? Because the concept is, if I'm going, the idea of it is,
going away.
Correct. When I'm going downward, I have to look, my area that I'm lowering this into has to be a safe location. So I'm investigating, I'm looking, I'm going forward, but I'm pulling it up this way. So I'm not expecting there to be any concern about what's on the other side where I've already been. So I'm pulling it up. Okay, the rope breaks and it falls down on the person. I didn't expect it to go there. Therefore, I'm karav la'ones in these cases. This would be a case where I'm not going to Golas because I am really wasn't my fault. Says the Gemara, Minani Mili, where do we know this rule from? So we have to point out that there are 3 places in the Torah, I believe, that the rules of Golas are mentioned. There's once in Bamidbar, the end Lamed Vav, Lamed Heir, Perak Lamed Heir, Lamed Vav, and then once in Dvarim, and once in Shmos. So we have 3 different sections. So we're going to quote Psukim interchangeably from those 3 different sections, right? So this first pasuk is from Bamidbar Lamed Hey, Vayipol Allah Vayamos, that the object falls on him and he dies. Ad sheyipol, it has to fall, which means derech nefila, it has to be in a downward motion. Tana Rabbanan, So now, Rabbi, let's go through these psukim in Bamidbar Lamed Hey to learn about what are the rules of Gullus. Bishgaga, the pasuk says that you kill somebody bishgaga, which, right, prat lemezid. That means that somebody who does it on purpose does not go to Gullus. Bivli das, without knowing, so that means prat lemiskavein. So that means that we're going to exclude somebody who intentionally murders. So mazid, he'd be considered the lemiskavein mazid. He's intentionally murdering, and he does it on purpose. So pshita, well, that obviously he'd be excluded from Gullus. Bar katolu, that's a murderer. That's the definition, right? You wanted to do it, and you did it. That makes you a murderer. So Rava says, ema prat lo omer mutter. What happens is the guy did it on purpose, yes, but he thought this murder was permissible. He didn't think that the act I'm doing right now is an act of murder, even though he literally killed somebody. He thought, for some reason, we'll have some cases coming up, he thought that this was going to be a permissible act. For example, he thought this was a cow. It was dark. He thought he was killing a cow, and it turns out it was a person. So he thought the action that he was doing...
How can you not know that you're counting a person?
Dark. It's dark.
Well, you can see
very dark.
You can see the four legs.
It's a good question. Amrle Abaye. So Abaye says, one second though, E Omer Mutter, if the guy... This is where we get back and forth the other way now. Abaye says, if the guy doesn't know, he thinks this is permissible, he thinks that the thing he's doing is permissible, onoshu. He's not mazid, he's not doing it on purpose, that's why he'd be exempt. He's going to be exempt because he's onus, because he is less liable. He didn't think he was doing anything, right? A person, in order to be negligent, would have to do something he thought was wrong for non-appropriate, but for acceptable reasons, right? An accident of some kind or something like that. But this, he didn't even know he was doing anything wrong. Why would he stop? If you told him you're killing right now, he would have said, yeah, of course, it's allowed. So why would that be Gullus? So Amarle, the answer is, he says to him, Sha'ani Omer, ha'omer mutter, karav lemezid. He says, because my opinion, this is going to be an argument between Rava and Abaye. Rava says, because it's my view that somebody who thinks something is permissible when it comes to murder, he's really worse. He's really amazing. Why? Because a person has to do better investigating than that. He can't think this murder is acceptable, right? And so this is the argument between Rava and Abaye, whether we consider killing when he thinks it's permissible to be too strict in Avera or too lenient in Avera. Rava feels it's too strict in Avera, and Abaye says, no, it's too lenient a case. Okay? So now we're on to the next. So this is Rava's giving his explanation. So let's continue on. So bivli das, without knowing, prat lemiskavein. So that excludes somebody who has intention. Miskavein pshita. So if he has intention, so then bar katolo, he's again death sentence. So Rava says prat lemiskavein laharog is a behema v'hareg. This is the case of somebody who thought he was going to kill an animal, and instead he killed a person, right? Not the other case. The other case was he actually thought that this murder was permissible, right? This is he actually kills an animal thinking that he kills a person thinking it's an animal. L'kusi v'haragas Yisrael. He thought the person that he was killing was a kusi, who we're going to say you're not liable for Gullus for, and he actually killed a Yisrael, and so he's not going to go to Gullus for that either. Okay, L'nafal v'harag ben kayam. He thought he was killing a stillborn child, or a child that's breathing now, but nevertheless is not going to last 30 days, so that's not going to be considered a murder. And instead, he kills a child who was able to survive and live. And then he's going to be that should be a murder, but since it's karav lemezid, that's why we're saying these are a case of karav lemezid, and you're exempt from Gullus.
This would be a Abaye would learn the pasuk.
Would Abaye learn the pasuk? Is that what we're saying here? No, because
I mean, the keeper for Abaye can learn that way because that's not a shita.
Bivli das.
Without knowledge.
Without knowledge.
Right.
So you're right. So we're saying Rava says Bivli das is one way, and Abaye is saying Bivli das is the other way. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. And it's machlokas? Okay, I got that.
It could be.
I don't think so. Even though they go back to Bivli das, they answer it the same way, prat lemiskavein, which is the same answer as Rava, as they said before.
How did you translate l'nafam harag? To fall.
No, a nafel. A nafel is a stillborn child.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they call it. Yeah. I didn't know. Okay.
A nafel is a stillborn child, but it's not stillborn, right? The born, it's non-viable infant, right? Okay, Tan Rabbanan. Im befesa. So now, what if the person, the pasuk is telling us, if two people are coming around a corner, and he bumps into the person and kills him. Right? He's walking around with his knife out like this. I always hold your scissors down, right? So he's walking around with his knife like this, and the guy walks around the corner and they bump into each other and stab him. That's not going to be chayav golos. Why? Because it needs to be befesa, which means suddenly or immediately in front of. So therefore,
he was holding the knife the wrong way. How can you not be chayav?
Sorry?
He was holding the knife the wrong way. How can you not be chayav?
Yes, but so this is going to be sort of a machlokas rishonim in how to understand this. Either one is looking like Yehuda says, look, you're holding your scissors the wrong way, and you know you're walking in a dangerous place. Therefore, you're supposed to be careful. If you're the one who's not careful, holding your knife like this, walking around a corner in a dangerous way, then you're karov lamezid. That's why you're exempt, right? Prat lekeren zavis is going to exclude somebody walking around the corner. On the other hand, others say, no, you're only liable if you could see a little bit in front of you and therefore could have avoided the situation. Since this is a corner and it's completely unavoidable, it's not your fault that something happened around the corner. And therefore you're karov la'ones. So it's subject to dispute amongst the Rishonim where...
It's a busy sidewalk or street and you're walking, no matter where you go, you'll bump into someone.
Yeah. So it's difficult for you to be able to... It's difficult to interpret this case. It can go either way. Okay?
Like I remember learning a guy who's cutting wood, and the axe head, he swings it, and it flies like 10 feet back and kills someone.
Hang on.
Chayav golos.
Yeah, we're gonna get.
Right.
That's the pasuk.
So how is that like?
We're gonna get to the pasuk, right? We're gonna get to the pasuk.
Right, get a grip on it.
There you go. Get a grip. Below Ava, it has to be without any animosity. Prat l'sone. That means that excludes somebody who hates another person. Hate another person, so then you have to be extra careful because you're unintentionally, subconsciously not being careful, and therefore you're karov lamezid. Right. Hadafo, right? If he pushes him, shadachfu begufo. If he pushes him with his body, oh hishlech alav. So then, he put something on him, right? Is that oh hishlech alav? Lahavi Yerida Shahid. So the pasuk says, "Oh Hishlich alav," where he throws something upon him, right? He throws something upon him. So that Lahavi Yerida Shitzorech Aliyah. That's to include every type of downward motion, even downward motions which are for the sake of bringing something up. For example, right? I want to chop this branch. It's up here. So what do? I take my axe and I go down like this, and then I give it a whack. What if I go down like this and I kill somebody in the downward motion? So I would say, well, that wasn't my move, right? My move was this way, right? No, once the Torah told me it only applies to downward motions, this pasuk tells me it applies to all downward motions, even a downward motion, which is in order to go back up. So therefore, it's every downward motion. So it's Yerida, that's what this pasuk, oh, hishlich alav. Below tzdiya, without trying to hunt him, prat lemiskavein letzad zeh v'holcha letzad acher. So this is going to exclude just to point out that this pasuk is in Shmos, right? We're going to be switching around, and then the next pasuk is going to be from Dvarim. This is where somebody says, "I want to throw a rock this way," right? And he throws, and it slips out of his hand and goes this way and kills somebody. So then that's not going to be allowed. That's already karov la'ones, because if what happened is completely not the thing, he would have been careful. He was throwing something over here. He knew to be careful over here, but he accidentally like this, and the thing flew out of his hand in the wrong direction. Not his fault. Vasher lot sada, that he did not hunt. Prat lemiskavin lozrok shtayim v'zarak arba. This exempts a person who wanted to throw it 2 amos in front of him, and instead it slips out of his hand and goes another 2 amos further. Right, it goes further away. Vasher yavo al re'ehu bayar, or he meets this person. This is the pasuk in Dvarim. I told you you're going to switch back and forth from Midbar. We went to Shmos. Now we're over to Dvarim. This is the case. The person was in a forest, right? And the example is that he's chopping wood in a forest. So why it has to be a forest? Ma ya'ar rishus v'nizik ulemazik likanis l'sham, because the location, this was Yehuda's point, the location has to be a place that both the person who does the damage, who does the killing, and the person who gets killed have the right to be there. If the person who gets damaged has no right to be there, let's say, for example, it's your private property. You're doing your roof, and it falls off and rolls onto your backyard, and somebody happened to be in your backyard without permission, so then you're not liable because he shouldn't have been there, right? Mm-hmm. So it has to be that that this was a place that the person who got damaged had a right to be there, and he got killed, but you should have checked. Okay, so those are the examples. Those are the rules. We got all the rules? Good. Bo mine Rabbi Yovo me Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yovo asked Rabbi Yochanan the question. Haya ola besulam v'nishmat hashliva mitachtov. Guy was going up a ladder, and the ladder rung breaks under his foot. He steps on it, and the rung of the ladder breaks. V'nafla, and he falls off the ladder, v'harga, and he kills somebody underneath. Mahu, what is the halacha there? Ki hai gavna in this case. Alahi, Eliyahi, o Yeridahi. Is it going up? Because ultimately he was trying to climb up the ladder. Or is it down? Because when he stepped on the rung sagged a little, and then he went through. That is exactly the case of going down in order to go back up, right? You push down on the rung in order to push your whole body up. That is Yerida Derech Aliyah, and we said that is Chayiv. Then you would be liable for Golus in that case. Because even Derech Yerida, the Pasuk had said, Derech Ohishlich Alav was to tell me that if I push down in order to go up, it is considered to be something that I have to be worried about.
What exactly is the status of the rung here? Like, maybe that's probably where it's all dependent on.
Great question. Esvei. So we're going to talk about that in a second. Ask valiant question. Zeh Klau. Kol shebederech yerida so gole. We had a brisa said anything that is the Mishnah said anything which is in the way of going down, you go to exile. Shalo bederech yerida so ain't no gola. But if it's not, you don't go to golos. Shalo bederech yerida so lasuye mai. What is the example of something which is not going down? Lav lasuye kahai gavna. Isn't that this case where the guy's going up the ladder? Ula tamech. 1 second. According to your reasoning, kol shebederech yerida so lasuye mai. What would be included in everything that's downward? El lasuye katzav. So are you trying to explain? Are you trying to include an axe? I think it's a katzav is an axe, right? Hachanami lasuye katzav. So this also is going. This is to include an axe. Tanya is going to brisa katzav shahim mekatzev, right? So he says. So let's say this is a butcher's cleaver. That's what a katzav is. It's a cleaver, right? So he says that this comes to. So take a look at this brisa. Brisa says like this: katzav shahayim mekatzev. Let's say the butcher. Okay, let's point this out, right? Here's our butcher. He looks like this, right? This is our butcher, and he has I don't know his collar, and he's got his face looks like this, right? This is our butcher, okay? And this is our butcher's arm, okay? Mm-hmm. So he's chopping his meat, okay? So in order to chop his meat, he starts here. He goes down a little bit. Then he swings his arm all the way back upward to his shoulder, goes behind his shoulder downward a little bit, and then comes forward very fast and chops. So he goes downward, litzorach aliyah in order to go back up. Then it's a downward litzorach aliyah to go back up, and then all the way down. Like 5 motions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? That's the 5 motions.
So it's on the upside
of this guy's shoulder. Okay? So this is what's going on with his katzav. So here's what happens. So here's the circumstance. We have a few brises that are going to be conflicting, and we're going to try to explain how this cleaver works. Katzav shayim mekatzev, right? Person was chopping with a cleaver. So Tanachada, one brisa says, Lefanav chayev lachorav potter. All of the actions in front of his body, he's chayev for. The actions behind him, behind his shoulder, he's potter for. V'tanyidach, another brisa says, lachorav chayev, whatever's behind him, he's chayev for. Lefanav potter. The exact opposite. Whatever's in front of him, he's exempt from. V'tanyidach, the third brisa says, bein lefanav, bein lachorav chayev. His in front of him, he's liable, and behind him, he's liable. And guess what the fourth one says? Bein lefanav, bein lachorav potter. Before, in front of him, and behind him, he's exempt. Velo kasha, but all the brises are not contradictory. Kan be yerida shelifanav v'aliyah shelachorav. The answer is this is talking about where this part of the motion. It is he's starting here at the motion and he swings upward and then downward. Okay, so upward, the behind his back swing, which is upward. So that is so that's yerida. The downward is in front of him, and the aliyah was behind him. Khan, next one is Ba'aliyah Shelafanov, the Yerida Shelacharv, is where he's at this part of his swing. He goes upward here and then downward behind him. And then therefore the behind him is where he gets in trouble. Khan be Yerida Shelafanov Shelacharv. The third brisa is when he's talking about this downward swing and this downward swing, say that he can be liable for both of those. And Khan be Aliyah Shelafanov Vishel Acharv. And the other one is saying that he's exempt for this upswing and this upswing. Right? So therefore, it all depends on what part of the swing we're talking about.
It's only talking about force, though. That's where it's distinguishing. Where, like, it's on by force. Like we said, stepping down on a ladder. I'm putting my force downwards, therefore I'm chayav. I'm swinging the axe downwards, therefore I'm chayav. How about if you are a plane trying to take off and something goes down and it falls on someone? I know that's a terrible. You're not intentionally trying to put a force down. It just happened. Would that be an oinus? That'd be an oinus.
That would be, well, yeah, because it's hard to be able to imagine you're dropping something from your plane on purpose, right?
Right. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're trying to go up, but somehow...
I would imagine, let's say you're in a hot air balloon, right? And you drop the sandbag.
Right.
Is that a yerida l'derech aliyah? Maybe, right? I'm throwing the bag down in order so that I can go up.
Right. So that I could see as being...
And you be chayav.
Right. That can be chayav.
If you drop the sandbag and you don't see anyone...
And you don't see anyone below, but you're supposed to look, right? Kill somebody. You drop the sandbag. I don't know why those things never kill people.
Even if you're high up in the air and you drop the sandbag?
So yeah, you'd be liable, right? So lema kitanai. So therefore, you see that's the point that he's trying to make. You say, what is derech yerida? You're trying to say derech yerida means only the downswing. I'm telling you that the derech yerida means even a downswing l'tzorech aliyah is also considered to be the down part, which is in order to go up is also considered. Right. Therefore, stepping on the ladder is also going to be a derech yerida l'tzorech aliyah, and therefore you'd be chayav golus. Mm-hmm. So now, but let's say lema kitanai. It's actually machlokas tanaim. Hava olev esulam v'nishmeta shliva mitaktav. This is where the point that Eli was trying to make, right? Somebody was going up a ladder and the rung breaks underneath him. So tani chada chayav. One brisa says you're liable. V'tanya idach pater. The other one says you're exempt. So it must be it's an argument. My love b'hakamiflagi. Let's say this is what they're arguing about. Demar sava yerida he. One says this is considered a downward because it's down in order to go back up. Umar savar aliyah. The other says no, this is really upward. The fact that the rung goes down a little bit isn't an issue. It's really going up. So the answer is low. No, not true. Tikuliyam aliyahi. Everyone agrees that this is that climbing up the ladder. If he steps on the ladder and goes up, that would be derech aliyah. Velo kasha. So, but this is not a contradiction. Kan lenazikin, kan legolus. This would be a circumstance about whether you'd be liable for damages. That means if I fall off the ladder and I hurt somebody, we always say an adam is muad li'olam. A person always is liable for damages, right? A person, whether it was his fault, negligent, not negligent, accidental, you're sleeping, you're always liable, right? But going to golus requires it to be a little bit intentional. You have to have a little bit of intent. So therefore, if you're climbing up the ladder and fall off and kill somebody, you would not go to golus. Whereas if you were going up the ladder and you fell off and hurt somebody, you would be chayav to pay. That's the first explanation. Iboy sema, or else if you want, I will explain that everybody holds that it is derech yerida, and you are going to go to Gol, and really so. And here's what's going on: ha v'ha liglos, that both prices are talking about going into Golas. V'lo kasha, and it's not a contradiction. This is what Eli wants to say: ha de asliya, ha de lo asliya. Depends how sturdy was the rung that he stepped on in the first place. Right? Is that what your point you're trying to make? If the rung is wormy, hence, when you step on it, it sags. Mm-hmm. So then it's going down. And that's derech yerida.
Like
and then
rope ones.
A rope ladder or a wood one that's wormy is the case. But if I have a metal ladder that doesn't bend at all, so then there's no derech yerida. There's no yerida, it's derech aliyah. And then it's just going to be, I step on it and I'm going up and then it breaks. Then I'm not responsible because there's no sagging that I'm responsible for.
Would it matter if you knew beforehand, like, you know what, this ladder, there's some weaknesses in this ladder, and I might not be able to rely on
That's a good question.
That rung.
If you knew about it, would that be korov lemezid? Right? You might think if you knew that you were doing something dangerous, you might be korov lemezid and wouldn't be chayav golos at all, right? V'bois ema, or else if you want to say havaha delo isliya, that both cases are not where there was any kind of rot or wormy in it. V'lo kasha ha demehadek ha delo mahadek. It depends on whether the rung was stuck in place well or not. Right. So if it was stuck in place with into the holes of the side of the ladder, so that the plank wouldn't move, this is probably more close to like your rope ladder, right? Then if the rung doesn't move, that's only aliyah. But if it's not really stuck in so well, and you step on it and it sags a little bit, so then it's yerida l'tzorech aliyah. And that's how you're going to look at this latter case.
That's
So-
not Loichus. It's not.
And well, so the way they come out is it's not a machlokas. The way they come out is it's all really just dependent on the circumstances.
Right.
We have Mishnah, we have brises that say one way and brises that say the other way, but that's only because they're talking about differences in circumstances.
Right. Okay.
Right? That's how they answer it all. Says the next mission. Nishmat habarzel mikato. Now back to an axe. Okay? The axe case is, right, the head of the axe breaks off of the handle, the harug, and it kills somebody. Rabbi Omer Eino Gola. Rabbi says you don't go to Golas for that. The axe head breaks off, you don't go to V'chamar Gola. And the Chachamim say you do go to Golas for that. Mina eitz hamisbakeya. What if the person is chopping, he hits the wood, and a splinter flies out from the wood that he chops? Rabbi Omer Gola. Rabbi says that's where you go to exile, and the Chachamim Eino Gola, and the Chachamim say you don't. It's a question of how you interpret this pasuk, right? The pasuk says that he's swinging the axe. Here's what it says: Tanya, we ordered a brisa. Amar lem Rabbi lechachamim. Rabbi says to the chachamim, v'chinemar v'neshel abarzel meitzo. It doesn't say that the head of the axe breaks off from its handle. V'alolo nemar ela min ha'etz. It says that if something from the wood goes off, right? So that means that in order to go to gullus, it's not the axe that's broken. This might be what your point was, right? If you're inspecting, you have to inspect and hold something being damaged, right? As Rebbe's point is, it's not the head of the axe that being loose, that almost is your fault, right? It's where you chopped and then a piece flies off, the ode, and then second of all, nemar eitz lamata v'nemar eitz lamata. It's talking about in the pasuk about chopping a piece of wood in the forest,
Right.
and it's talking about the wood, which is about the handle. Ma eitz hamor lamala mina eitz hamisbakea af eitz hamor lamata mina eitz hamisbakea. Both times when it says the word wood, it should be talking about the same wood. You went to the forest to chop wood, therefore the thing that killed the person is the wood that you were chopping. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav. So Rabbi Chia bar Ashi says to Rav, Ushnehem mikra echad darshu. Both the Chachamim and Rebbe are arguing in the interpretation of the same pasuk, because the pasuk says v'neshel abarzel min ha'etz. The metal breaks off from the wood. Rabbi Savar yesh em lemesoras. Rabbi says we're going to explain it according to the way that it is understood, right? Not necessarily the way it's read. V'nishal ksiv. It's v'nishal ksiv, and it causes something to break off. Right? That's how the word is written, without a yud, right? But it's venishal. It just says nun shin lamed. There's no vowels there, so therefore you read it as the wood causes the axe causes a piece of wood to fly off. V'rabbanan savar yeshem lemikra. Rabbanan say you got to be able to interpret it the way the pasuk is actually read, and that is venishal karinon. It breaks, which means the axe actually breaks, and that which is flying off is the head of the axe. V'Rebbe yeshem mesoras v'irlei. But 1 second, Rebbe doesn't hold of yesh im lemesoras. We have this argument constantly. Rebbe does not hold that you are going to interpret the pasuk according to the an alternate understanding than the way it's written. V'amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz Beishamai Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Akiva Kul Sviril Hu Yesh Im Lamikra. That Rabbi Yehuda is on the list of all the rabbis who hold they're going to follow what is written, not the way that we're going to be able to read it alternatively. So the answer is Hainu dekamer lahu ve'od. That's why Rebbe, you're right. Rebbe didn't like that answer. He said, and also here was another answer, right? For the fact that there's a hekesh of the word eitz above and the word eitz below, we're going to say that it's talking about the same thing. Now that I have a pasuk that indicates it means the same thing, now I'm allowed to use yeshem lemesoras because I have to read the pasuk a different way. I have to read.
We missed you, kid.